With the classic space sim X3 Albion Prelude rapidly approaching its 10th birthday, I thought I'd take a look back over the decades worth of international modding efforts that have gone into this game. There are a lot of different projects that vastly changed the way this game is played. There are even some mods still being worked on to this day, so of course the description will have all of the info and links to all of these different projects, and let's get started. Starting out with the old Terran Conflict game, we have the Jupiter Incident and NHTC, which stands for New Horizons. These are both big overhaul mods that add new ships, new sectors, new weapons, new game starts, and New Horizons even has its own story plot to it. But unfortunately, I'm not going to have a lot of time to cover those in detail, but let's take a look at XTC in the bottom left, which also has an Albion Prelude version. XTC stands for Extended. This is perhaps one of the biggest mods that was ever made for an X3 game, and it's a definite cult classic among veterans. It greatly fleshes out the universe of the game, be that through the galactic news system it adds, the new NPC behaviors, or the whopping 200 new sectors that are gradually added to the gate network over time in the game. The universe expands as time passes. There's also a fully functional difficulty system and a lot of custom menus that greatly enhance the usability of the game. And combat has also been greatly enhanced. A whopping 57 new weapons have been added to play around with, and there's also a whole system for diverting power between engines, lasers, and engine boosting that you also have to manage during combat. And of course all the missiles have also been redesigned and rebalanced to better fit within the mod. There's also a ton of really unique features, some of which Egosoft even adapted for later games, such as the shipyard and wharf split for big and large ships. The player can even own these shipyards and wharfs eventually and build their own ships at these locations. There are factory ships that create wares on the go, there are new bounty hunter NPCs, and the missions have been greatly overhauled and improved. Some of the best designed missions I've seen within X3 to this day. There's also a cool feature where ships that have ammo, missiles, or mines in their cargo bay cause a violent explosion when they explode, which does collateral damage to nearby ships. A lot of fun can be had with that feature. And the whole thing is just visually stunning. In addition to the very nice engine and particle effects, this mod has the best looking planets I've ever seen in an X3 mod, and there's a lot of really cool, well-designed custom ships that greatly enhance the rosters for the 6 races in the game. Additionally, one of this mod's greatest features are the racial variants for stations and factories. Unlike the base game where the Argon Federation looks like it designed all the stations in the universe, we have race-specific factories for everything, even the most mundane ore mines, and it greatly enhances the immersion of the X universe. So that has been XTC, one of the biggest and best mods probably to this day to exist for X3. Moving on, we have a whole category of smaller mods known as scripts, and these can be added to the game to add various features or commands or behaviors to various aspects of the game. The Egosoft forums have a huge compilation of many scripts that were made by the community over the years, and you should definitely give this a scroll through if you're going to start playing one of the older X3 mods, as these are miscellaneous features that you can pick and choose to add to your game. Big mods like XTC that I just covered and upcoming XRM and some others have lists of which of these are compatible or not. You should definitely give this a look. Alright, so moving on to some of Albion Prelude's bigger mods, we start with LooManckstrat's Overhaul mod. And what this mod does is it is pretty lightweight compared to some of the other ones. It doesn't add any new ships or anything. It does add a bunch of new sectors, but the main thing it does is changes to the HQ and to ship equipment. So all ships will come pre-installed with lasers, shields, and equipment, and maxed out tuning. This is for both the player and for enemies. So that aspect of the game is greatly simplified. And the HQ is now able to build stations just like in Farnham's Legacy, and the production resource consumption and all that has been rebalanced as well. So if you're looking for a mostly vanilla playthrough of just these changes, I'd recommend checking out this mod. So here's a really cool mod that not a lot of people know about, probably because it was only released in Germany to my knowledge. It's called Enhanced Shield Effects. Shield damage taken by ships results in a shield shimmer effect, and obviously it doesn't happen when the ship has depleted shields, so you can tell in a huge fight when they're starting to take hull damage. And every race has its own unique shield color for all their ships, so can see the ATF one has this blue grid effect, and the Terrans have a white one. And this mod normally just supports the vanilla ships, and I think there's a few other mods that have patches for it to work with their own custom ships. So if you're playing a mostly vanilla mod run, I highly recommend you pick this one up. Alright, moving on to a really big mod, we have XRM, the X Rebalance Mod. Now this touches pretty much every aspect of Albion Prelude. It adds new ships, new sectors, new mechanics, new NPC behaviors, new types of enemies, new missions. It fixes vanilla bugs. It adds all sorts of new mechanics, like the ability to have your own orbital weapons platforms, special software that you can only get from special stations hidden in the universe, more things to find in the universe. And of course, its main purpose is that it rebalances the game. It changes combat from vanilla almost completely. A lot of the weapons are no longer shared among all the races, so every race won't have the particle accelerator cannon anymore. Every race has unique weapons that they use now. And also, there's a lot of customization options for this mod. There are hull multiplying packs you can add, which completely overhaul and add a multiplier to the base hit points of every ship, so you can scale how long you'd like battles to last. One of my biggest gripes with the vanilla game was that every ship felt like it was made out of paper. Right, you could take down a heavy frigate using nothing more than a scout fighter in the vanilla game. It also fully supports the cockpit mod. It supports a lot of the miscellaneous scripts I touched on earlier, and it also has a special mode called Advanced Universe, which completely overhauls the way the jump drive works as well. And in addition to all of that, it's got graphical enhancements. I'm sure I've been rolling some footage of it, but there are some nice engine trails, special flame effects. It looks a lot prettier than the base game. So if you're looking for a super plus version of Albion Prelude, you should definitely check out XRM. Now it's time to get to EMC, the Enhanced Mod Collection for Albion Prelude. So this actually incorporates the Time of the Truth mod, which is why I didn't cover it earlier, and incorporates it into X3AP alongside a whole bunch of scripts and smaller mods in a huge mod pack. There's a lot of changes here, but the main thing to take away from this is the 10 new main plots that it adds. If you want story content and quests to follow, this is the mod to check out. They have custom voice acting. There's a whole pilot, personnel, and payroll system, just like in X4. They have improved races built in. There's many balance changes and a lot of really cool looking custom ships. I've noticed a lot of very neat capital ships for a lot of the races that fit right in with the rest of the game. There's also 2 brand new races, one of which is the Ancients, that play roles in the plots and in the game as well. So there's a lot of content here, but unfortunately this mod pack is quite dated. It doesn't have any of those graphical enhancements that XRM or the upcoming Litcube mods have. So if you can put that aside and you don't mind going back to dealing with the old vanilla style of gameplay, there's a lot of content here to be enjoyed. Alright, now for the big one, Litcube's universe. You can see how many mods use it as a foundation. That's how monumental this is. And starting off, it just has a million quality of life improvements, starting with the map. Look at this vanilla map compared to the Litcube map. I don't even need to explain how much of an improvement this is. You can color code your ship names to find them easier in your menus. The stations in the universe have a massively increased inventory limit, so they can finally carry more than 2 or 3 of their products, especially for weapons. Hull damage no longer deletes your inventory. Abandoned ships appear at the top of the list in the map, so you actually notice that they're abandoned. Weapons and other things don't break CETA as easily. I can go on and on. There's just too many quality of life things to list in this video. There's a lot of really important features as well, like a fully functioning missile countermeasure system called Chaff that actually protects you, unlike the old missile defense mosquito system, where the mosquito missile would circle the missile it was supposed to shoot down and fail. We've also got global bailing across the entire map, so any ships in combat have a chance to bail before being picked up by NPC salvagers. This is a massive early game boon to the player who can go around combat zones looking for ships. It's no longer just whoever the player was shooting at that can bail. There is also a brand new and fully automatable mining system, which is a great way to make money as you transition to later stages of the game. Now all this is really great, but I still need to address the elephant in the room when it comes to Litcube's universe, and that is that the mod's design philosophy is completely different than that of X3AP. Combat is completely favoring numbers rather than the heroics of your piloting ability. You can't take on more enemies than maybe 2 or 3 and expect to win. You just cannot and will not win if you're outnumbered. Dogfighting and flying your fighter in combat missions is also not very fun. If you want fun single pilot gameplay and dogfighting, you should go check out the X3AP mod. But with all that being said, all this is because Litcube was designed for massive fleet combat. You won't find combat on this scale in any other mod because it simply isn't possible. The combat rebalancing and the performance improvements are what make it possible to do this in Litcube's universe. There's also automated fleet management tools and logistics abilities for all of your stations and ships so that all of this is feasible. So as your combat rank increases in Litcube, you'll find that instead of just upgrading to a M6 Corvette and being able to take on the combat missions, you're going to find that you need to bring your own swarm of maybe a dozen fighters with you and fight the enemy that way. And that's actually possible because they're not going to just collide and die like they do in the standard game. It's very jarring for players to get used to having to use a fleet rather than soloing everything in their player ship, but once you do, Litcube's universe has some of the best fleet combat you can get in X3. And then finally, the last thing with LU is that all of the story content has been removed, as well as the unfocused jump drive and the gate hub. Instead, what we have is a final boss that waits for you at the end of the game for you to build up your strength and have an epic showdown to beat the game. And that will take maybe a few dozen hours depending on how good you are at Litcube's universe. So with that being said, this mod heavily focuses on the sandbox. There's a lot of very advanced automation features that significantly outshine the commercial agents and CLS software from the vanilla game, which allows you to crank out absurd amounts of resources and money used to build huge fleets that you need to fight the late game battles. But yeah, I can't cover it all here. There's still a ton to this mod that I haven't been able to touch on, but that is Litcube's universe. So now I'll get into the post-Litcube side of mods, which is the whole right side of the chart here, starting with Star Wars LU, which is SWLU. And what it is a Star Wars edition of Litcube. So the full Litcube mod is still here, all the features, all those advanced scripts and things, but it's a Star Wars setting. All of the factions have Star Wars ships. You won't find any vanilla ships in the mod. You can still purchase them and use them, but none of the NPCs will. So it's a full immersive Star Wars experience. And I've made a few upgrades to standard Litcube. There's a few more abandoned ships you can find. You have Sita on the spacesuit repair laser. There's a bunch of other little tweaks, balance changes and other things. But yeah, it's basically just a big Star Wars mod that you can play within Litcube's universe. And as you can see from the footage, it's through Litcube that you can have these giant Star Wars battles on the scale of something like Empire at War within X3. And there's well over 250 unique ships in this mod. I will add that for Star Wars LU, there is a port of the Improved Races 2 script. This adds faction, border wars, and sector takeover between the different factions in the game. It's not available for regular Litcube, but you can get it for Star Wars LU. So you'll notice that I have an entirely separate section for miscellaneous scripts for Litcube's universe, and that's because Litcube's universe changes so much of the game's inner workings that most of the original mods and scripts made for X3AP will not work in Litcube's universe, such as Improved Races 2, Bounty Board. A lot of the big ones will not work. There are some exceptions. One of them is Marine Repairs and Training, which is a small mod that lets Marines work on your ships to automatically repair them over time, and they also work on carriers to repair landed fighters. It's a pretty popular mod by Litcube users. But if you look here, we have a forum compilation by Solarhawk that has all of the scripts that were specifically made for Litcube's universe. You should definitely give this page a look if you're going to try out LU. Notable ones are Satellites Monitoring, X3 Missions Reloaded, and the Cockpit mod, which is also available for Litcube. So Star Wars LU actually has its own big overhaul mod on its own, and it's called Galaxy in Chaos, GIC. And what this is it has a bunch of brand new game starts. So just like Star Wars LU, you've got some mid-game game starts. Starts you off with stations and some other important assets. You can start with bigger classes of ships, and of course across all the factions, and there's hard ones and easy ones. But most importantly, what you get is the map. This is a full custom Star Wars themed map for Star Wars LU. And I'll briefly mention this last one. There is a Star Trek mod called STLU that is in very early development for Litcube's universe. I'll have a link for this mod's Discord if you want to follow its development. So that about does it for the standard series of Litcube mods. But as we further depart from the regular gameplay loop of X3, we get to the Mayhem mods, and there's 2 of them in total, and they're both completely different mods, so they need to be looked at separately. The one on the left with the gray logo is known as Mayhem 2, in particular version 2.9.13. Mayhem 2 almost completely changes the genre of the game itself. It's more like an empire building 4X strategy game than a space sim. You, the player, along with all of the individual AI factions, are fighting a galactic turf war over the control of the sectors. You'll start out claiming a few abandoned sectors and getting established, but once land is quickly grabbed up, you're going to have to start invading other empires as you continue to expand. And of course, the political landscape of the universe is constantly in flux. Sectors are changing hands constantly, stations being destroyed and rebuilt elsewhere, and empires may lose control of entire sections of the galaxy. In addition to the constant chaos and destruction occurring all over the map at any given time, the OCV, Litcube's final boss faction, also invades the player on regular intervals, getting harder based on how strong the player's empire is. So you have a lot of freedom over the level of challenge you want to give yourself with this mod. Obviously you can declare war on all the different factions because the mod provides the tools for you to be self-sufficient economically, and therefore you'll be being invaded all the time by everyone at once. Or you can try and be friendly with everyone and only go after pirate sectors or xenon sectors, but again, it's up to you. There's a lot of fun to be had in this mod. But I need to get to the gameplay because it's drastically different than pretty much anything else X3-wise, even in all the other mods. First of all, you don't even have a repair laser, you can't get one, and shipyards don't even sell ships, so you can't even buy ships from the factions you're friendly with. So the only way to get ships is to claim a few sectors of your own and get your economy going. Every sector you claim will build a sanctuary station in it, and this is kind of like the player headquarters from the base game, except it's much more advanced. These are the centers of your economy used to build ships, build stations, and raise a growing population of workers that handles your production and can be recruited into your marine force. This mod also has one of the coolest, unique, and most advanced marine systems I've ever seen in X3. But anyway, I think you get the point. This mod has a ton of very unique mechanics. It plays completely differently than anything that come before it. And I should also add, since it was built off of Litcube's universe, it inherits all of those quality of life changes and focus on big fleet combat. And a lot of the mechanics that Litcube introduced, such as couriers, the ship compendium, and the advanced MLCC fleet management, have been enhanced for Mayhem 2. So those features have been further polished and further enhanced for this mod. So Litcube had a Star Wars mod. Mayhem 2 also has a Star Wars mod. It basically Mayhem 2 with Star Wars ships and Star Wars stations. It basically takes all of the assets from Star Wars LU and puts them into Mayhem 2, so that mod also exists. And finally, that brings us to Mayhem 3. Now, Mayhem 3 isn't just an upgraded or better version of Mayhem 2. It's different. It's redesigned, it does a lot of things differently than Mayhem 2, so I wouldn't write off Mayhem 2 or consider Mayhem 3 definitively better than Mayhem 2. But for Mayhem 3, the general idea is pretty much the same. Different empires, including the player, are vying for control of the galaxy in a very advanced war system. Except this time, there's a fully simulated economy, just like how X4 works. Every single ship out there that you see, including its equipment and the stations, they've all been constructed using real resources that the NPCs have constructed using their factories. When ships are destroyed, or when they're hacked and stolen by the player, they actually have to be rebuilt and reconstructed using the different resources and factories that the NPC races use. This can lead to some very dynamic warfare scenarios where putting the hurt on a faction's economy in the right ways can actually inhibit their ability to build ships, and therefore they'll lose more territory. I could go on and on about the Mayhem 3 economy forever, but in addition to that, Mayhem 3 features a randomized map generator. That's right, when you start a new game, you can define the galactic map you want to play on, randomize it, set different parameters, and have a very customizable and very replayable experience. The logistics have also been overhauled and actually quite simplified for Mayhem 2. Certain products like lasers and shields are easier to produce and require less ingredients. You also have a repair laser this time too, which certainly helps out in the early game. And also, quite importantly, Mayhem 3 does away with the jump drive entirely. It doesn't exist in the game anymore. This greatly enhances the strategic value and importance of borders, sector choke points, and map layout because ships can't just teleport anywhere they want anymore. You actually have to consider whether a given trade route is safe or not, as your automated traders will travel to and from their destinations buying and selling cargo from allied nations. And you have to make sure your borders are protected, especially in a multi-front war that you may or may not be fighting, because if you can't respond in time, you may start to lose some of your territory. Now you, the player, can still unlock a system of teleportation that lets you transfer to any ship you own anywhere on the map to take direct command if needed, but the loss of the jump drive overall results in a much more strategic game than Mayhem 2. Now there's a lot more that's been changed in Mayhem 3 to Mayhem 2, but I think I've covered all the big ones at this point. So anyway, Mayhem 3 has a few add-on mods and I'll cover those real quick. First of all, we have the Extra Backgrounds pack, which adds a bunch of new custom skyboxes to the pool of skyboxes available for Mayhem 3. Of course, they're all randomized and assigned to sectors when the map is generated, but there's no reason not to get this. Moving on, we have the MSS ship pack for Mayhem 3. The ships are originally from a Stellaris mod, although they have been ported to the Mayhem 3 research stations, such that the player is able to research these blueprints and produce them at their own outpost. The mod also comes with a few weaponizable stations that you can produce at your outpost that come with missile launchers and some heavy defenses that you can use for defense within your Mayhem empire. You can also pick a color scheme for the entire fleet when you install the mod. This dictates their engine colors and the lights on the ships. Now the reason I'm highlighting this rather than other ship mods is that this has to be separately installed to Mayhem 3. Most other mods like XTC and XRM have all of their custom ships pre-built into the mod, so if you want this, you have to install it separately. And finally, we come to M3R Stronger Factions, which is the Mayhem 3 Rebalanced mod. The aim of this mod is to introduce a lot of quality of life tweaks to Mayhem 3's gameplay, and it also greatly increases the prominence of the main factions, including the Pirates and the Yaki. It introduces a cool comeback system where as the main empires start to lose territory, they get a production boost that allows them to hit back harder and retake their lands, which of course boosts their opponent in turn. So wars scale up over time, and the universe just generally has a lot more mayhem in it, which is always good for Mayhem. It also makes a number of tweaks to maintenance, hacking, and a bunch of other Mayhem 3 mechanics, and it also rebalances the capital ships in quite a profound way, because in this mod, capital ships M7 and up have had their hit points vastly redistributed away from shields and into hull strength. Their shields are much weaker, and their hull strength is quite significant, but this means capital ships will not really be able to avoid taking hull damage in fights, and you'll have a greater strategic importance to planning repairs or setting damaged ships to continue to pressure your enemies, which leads to greater high-risk war strategies for Mayhem 3. As with all the other mods I've talked about today, I'll have links to the forum posts where you can read about all the features in detail. Okay, so to recap, the XTC and XRM mods greatly enhance the vanilla experience, combat's a lot more fun, new ships, and they look really nice. The EMC mod has the old vanilla graphics and vanilla gameplay style, but it has a lot of new story content. Litcube's universe changes the game to focus on fleet combat and combat by strength in numbers, and it has a lot of quality of life improvements to make it focus on heavy industrialization and automation. Mayhem 2 is an empire building game with the dynamic war system where you and the other factions are fighting to take over sectors. The Mayhem 3 mod gets rid of the jump drive, has the randomized universe generator, and it has the fully simulated economy. So hopefully you found at least some of these mods interesting. There are so many vastly different ways to play and experience X3AP today, and with mods still in development, it looks like this game still has a lot more to offer in the future as time goes on as well.